Hatfield McCoy Museum in Liberty, Kentucky with Fred and Sheila McCoy. I'm Fred. Sheila's behind the camera. You can go to fredmccoy.com for all the information on the museum and books and different things. Again, this is one of our books that we wrote several years ago, Monument for a Murderer. Of course, we know who had the big monument, who was the murderer. And it's almost 900 pages, and what we're going to talk about right now is the Election Day fight, Ellis and Hatfield. And not going to talk much about it. I just want to read something that we put in our book years ago, and like I said, we tried to use documentation. Now, back in the day, the newspapers really wasn't the best documentation you could have, but it beat nothing at all. It beat the stories that we get nowadays on YouTube and things like that. At least it had some truth to it. And I'll start off and I'll tell you about the fight, basically. This fight took place between Tolbert McCoy and Bad Elias Hatfield. Now, Bad Elias Hatfield was the brother to Preacher Ance Hatfield, my great-great-grandfather, which that made Elias my great-great-uncle. But he was also the brother to Constable Floyd Hatfield. He was the brother to Sheriff Basil Hatfield. So they were all the sons of George Hatfield. George Hatfield was my great-great-great-grandfather, and that was their father. Tolbert and Bad Elias had been drinking moonshine all day, which that's election. Even when I was a kid growing up, they used to take election whiskey and $5 bills and put around it with a rubber band and buy people's votes. Everybody got drunk on election day. I remember that from a little kid on up. So I can imagine what it was like back in this time. Tolbert and Bad Elias got in an argument over some money that Bad Elias had owed Tolbert for a fiddle. Of course, you know, you didn't have a lot to do back in them days. Banjos and fiddles and things like that, that's how they spent their time. Didn't owe them but a couple of dollars. Anyway, they got in an argument, finally turned into a fight. Tolbert McCoy and Bad Elias got in a fight, and Tolbert McCoy got the better of my great-great-grandfather. He whooped Bad Elias. Now, they say that Bad Elias was a bad dude. So I imagine, which they say that Tolbert was a deputy sheriff in life. Him and his older brother, Jim McCoy, both were Pike County deputy sheriffs. And 100 years later from when that was, from 1882 to 1982, my brother, Barry McCoy, and I were both deputy sheriffs 100 years later in Pike County. But either way, they got through fighting. I imagine the moonshine had something to do with both of them, but Bad Elias went and sat down by a tree, catching his breath. Ellis and Hatfield had been watching what was going on during this time, and he saw Tolbert get the best of Bad Elias, and he's also drinking the moonshine. Ellison stands up and says, try that on a real man, or try that on somebody your size. And, of course, Tolbert, full of moonshine, they go again. But I want to read you this newspaper article. And it's hard to read in the book, but it says here that Tolbert McCoy, Bad Elias Hatfield, and Bad Elias, Tolbert wanted $1.75 that he had been owed. And after they got through fighting, Tolbert sat down, or Bad Elias sat down. And they called Ellis and Hatfield deacon in the newspaper article. Now, Preacher Ance also went by Deacon Hatfield from the church, but Hatfield denied the debt. And it says Deacon Ellison Hatfield carrying a large pocket knife, and Elias, his brother, carrying a pistol, appeared. And several of the McCoy factions gathered around. Farmer McCoy also carrying a pistol. The deacon, talking about Ellison, was usually peaceful, but now he was full with corn whiskey, and he dared the other to fight a man of his own size. And Tolbert drew out a knife like that held by the deacon, and the two closed in and fought for a long time. That's a newspaper. That's not my story where I heard a rumor, or I think this happened, or I think that happened. That's from the news. And the newspapers, even back then, they would go around and talk to different witnesses. Now we know that by this time, 3 of the McCoy boys had been taken to Warm Hollow, West Virginia, and Randall McCoy was gone to Pikeville to try to get some law enforcement to help get his boys out of captivity that had been kidnapped. So I don't imagine that there were a lot of McCoys at the election ground hanging out when the newspapers started interviewing these witnesses. And the first thing they said was that Ellison Hatfield had a large pocket knife. And then they said once he pulled his knife, that Tolbert McCoy pulled his knife. So again, you both got knives. Now, I'm going to clarify something here. Over the years, they have said that Ellison was stabbed 27 times. Alan Hatfield said on a radio interview that he was stabbed 40 times. I say hogwash to all of it. I say hogwash. And if it's not hogwash, then the West Virginia Hatfields were a bunch of cowards. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think they were cowards. So I don't want to, I said that to get your attention because I don't feel like they were cowards. But if you believe, or if anybody out there believes that you've got a bunch of people on an election ground and the men are over here underneath the shade trees and they're all passing the jug around, drinking that shine, and they get in a fight, and the Hatfields sit there and watch while 3 McCoys gang up on one. It says in the newspaper that Good Elias had his pistol. But if you think that they sat there and watched as 3 McCoys stabbed Ellison Hatfield as fast as you can go 40 times, 27 times, and they're standing there watching while these boys are stabbing Ellison Hatfield. If you believe that, I've got some oceanfront property in Arizona. Do you catch my drift? I don't want to seem obnoxious and stuff, but I'm just saying, I've never met a Hatfield or a McCoy, especially from back home in the mountains, West Virginia or Kentucky, Devil Ance's family or Preacher Ance's. I've never met one that was a coward. Went to school with them, raised up with them, friends with them, enemies with them, fought with them. It's just like anybody else. They're good and bad and everybody. McCoys, Hatfields, it don't matter. But if anybody believes that a bunch of Hatfields sat there drinking and laughing and carrying on and watching while 3 men jumped onto one, I say hogwash. I'm going to call BS on it. I don't think it happened. One story was that he was stabbed about 6 times, and then he picked up the rock. And he goes on to talk about the rock here. Ellison picked up a rock, had Tolbert on the ground, and reached over and got a rock and was going to bust him in the head with the rock. And everybody, even the Hatfields, everybody that was there said that it would have killed. If he would have hit Tolbert with that rock, it would have killed him. and you're talking 1800s. You don't have x-rays, you don't have stitches, and you don't have all these things that we do in modern daytime. So it was either kill or be killed. And that's when Farmer or Wilm, not Randall Jr., he wasn't there. He only showed up when he heard the commotion, and by the time he run in, Wilm was running out, and they grabbed the wrong person. But this is Keeping It Real with Fred and Sheila McCoy on the Hatfield McCoy Museum site, and see you next time.